Welcome to today's Global Connections television program. I'm Bill Miller. The main purpose of this show is to promote a discussion of major international issues such as war and peace, economic and social development, climate change, and human rights that impact people worldwide. New knowledge will inspire, involve, and motivate all of us to better deal with these challenges and to help create a better world. Today's program is going to focus upon a wide range of issues from information communication technology to e-waste over to cybersecurity. We'll be back in just a moment to talk about these and other important issues. Welcome back to our program. Today we're going to focus upon a wide range of issues from information communication technology to cybersecurity. My guest today is an expert on these issues. My guest today is Ms. Atefeh Riazi. Ms. Riazi is the United Nations Chief Information Technology Officer, and she is an Assistant Secretary General in the Office of Information and Communications Technology. Ms. Riazi served both in the public and the private sectors. Ms. Atefeh Riazi, welcome to today's Global Connections program.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
I appreciate you being with me today. Let's start off right at the top. What is the UN Office of Information and Communications Technology? What is its main purpose?
I think our main purpose, just like the rest of the UN, is to deliver on the mission. Our goal is to make sure that we bring the technology that the substantive arm of the UN need, that the inner core of the UN need, to deliver on their core mission of peace and security, rule of law, international law, human rights. And from that perspective, we aim to bring alignment to modernize the inner working of the UN. So it's easier for our people out in the field to deliver better. Our goal is to align with the mission of the Secretary General with Sustainable Development Goals to make sure that we have the right technology and we are delivering on the core mission.
Let's get into that. It's very important. What is the role of technology in dealing with the issues that you just laid out? And where were we yesterday and where are we going to hopefully be tomorrow?
That's a great question. The world has changed a lot because of the technology. If you look at the 20th century, we had two world wars, a Cold War, we sent a man to the moon, we had antibiotics. But something happened, which was the creation of the internet. And when the internet was created, the world changed. We went from Homo sapiens to Homo mobilis to connected sapiens. And the technology and innovation immensely impacted the private sector, it's impacted the governmental entities, and it's impacted the world, the way we work, the way we move, our social connections. It's allowed for a lot of what we dreamed before take place. If you look at the area of education, area of healthcare, the ability to have remote doctors, the ability to educate every child. But at the same time, it's brought issues with it. Because when we look at areas like the dark web or the deep web, we look at cyber wars of the future, we look at cyber intrusions. Those are big issues that we have to tackle as we go forward while we're using technology to improve for the benefit of the various entities, governmental entities, as well as human life.
If we could, let's focus just for a moment. It's going to be difficult to do. There are 17 Sustainable Development Goals that were adopted by the United Nations General Assembly last year in September at the opening session of the General Assembly, and they are going to run for 15 years. 17, and I won't mention all of them, but are to eliminate poverty, to eliminate hunger, to empower women, to focus on sustainable development, to have clean oceans. How can you are you tying your work, your information into helping to achieve these Sustainable Development Goals, realizing it's not just the UN that's going to achieve them, but the basically thousands, tens of thousands of non-governmental organizations and individuals, millions of people around the world who be working to achieve these goals. Are you bringing your expertise into this?
That's our aim. Our hope is to bring technology from a utility part of the technology to where we actually bring in value in. And this is a change you see a lot happening in the private sector. When we look at the Sustainable Development Goals, we cannot achieve them without the use of technology. And the second thing is we cannot achieve it on our own, because all the social issues of the world, and you mentioned, you got hunger, you got disease, wars, gender equity, smart cities, clean oceans, climate change. This is a space where we have to seek partnership with the private sector. We have to bring the NGOs, the governments, and the UN, and especially we have to ask the technology sector to be engaged and involved. Because if it comes to education, through closing the digital divide, through bringing education through the internet, we can educate so many children. We can educate so many women and girls. If you look at the healthcare space, with remote doctors, we can do that across the world in the developing markets. But we do need that partnership, because within the private sector, private sector creates $30 trillion a year. Governmental entities, UN NGOs, $3 trillion a year. But all these issues of the world are left to NGOs and the governmental entities to deal with. So how do we bring the partnership in? How do we bring the technology sector in? And how do we, as ICT professionals of the UN, transform ourselves to focus more on the critical mission, the critical goals of the UN, and less so on the inner workings and further modernization, which we have to do. But I think it's a slight shift. So we are well balanced in terms of delivery, as well as harmonized working and an efficient way of working internally.
That was an excellent segue when you're talking about the private sector, because I know that you and your staff meet with representatives, a lot of representatives from the private sector, from Google, Facebook, different organizations like that, companies like that. How do you take those meetings, and when you go into those meetings, obviously you have goals as to what you want to achieve, but do you develop a strategy, you come out with a fixed plan on how you can work in that partnership that you're talking about to help focus on these problems we're dealing with, be it cybersecurity or working to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals?
I'm glad you mentioned cybersecurity, because this is a big area where we seek partnership. Area of analytics is another area we seek partnership. We are looking at creating this advisory board with the private sector, where we bring key innovators in that sector to come and help us think through, as we strategize, to come up with different program elements related to Sustainable Development Goals, so we can help our lines of business that are delivering on the mission, because they're the ones that have to deliver. The governments are the ones that have to deliver. We are here to enable that delivery through the use of technology. So we're doing a lot of partnership, we're doing a lot of outreach. Academia is a big part of a big entity that we are doing an outreach in terms of research. And we have an initiative called Unite Ideas. What we believe is all those areas and the social issues within the Sustainable Development Goals cannot be achieved by ourselves, or even including the private sector. There are so many technologists in the world that want to do good, that want to use technology to do good. How do we reach out to them? So Unite Ideas is a way of going out and saying, these are complex problems, and we have 15 years to solve them. Come and help us, come and join us. So not only reaching out to the private sector saying, you know, there's tremendous value to technology, but there's also that flip side of technology, right? If you look at cyber wars of the future, if you look at the deep web and the dark web, we need your help to use technology to address big issues, but we also need your help to address the negative impact of technology. Looking at e-waste, looking at child trafficking in a deep web. This space has been created because of innovation. And innovation is amoral. Technology is amoral. You can use it for good, you can use it for bad. So we need the help of the technology sector to use it for good and mitigate the impact, the negative impact from the use of technology, which is impacting us.
And our viewers can go to your website, unite.un.org. That's unite.un.org, and get much more information about what we're talking about. There's another component. I want to make sure that I get this right. In an article you did not long ago with a technical group or technologically oriented publication, you had a quote, "Artificial intelligence might be the last innovation humans create." What do you mean, first off, by artificial intelligence, AI? I guess we all have our own definitions. And why do you think that might be the last innovation that humans create?
So, so as you see, the advancements in technology, especially in very advanced algorithm, in robotics, is huge. It's our prediction that over the next 20, 30 years, a lot of labor would be replaced with robots and artificial intelligence. A lot of it is done today when you look at manufacturing, when you look at cars that can drive themselves. As this continues, it has huge impact in innovation. It has huge impact on the labor force. Because imagine globally, 70 to 80% of the labor, 40, 50 years, to be done by artificial intelligence. What will happen to the economics? What's the financial impact? Will we have unrest? What's the social impact? There are huge political and social issues that we have to tackle with. And as artificial intelligence is a lot smarter than human intelligence, because we've created this species we call technology, a lot faster, a lot smarter, and the innovation will happen a lot faster through the use of artificial intelligence. It's impossible for us as humans to be able to innovate without artificial intelligence. And we need to understand what is the ramifications, what does that mean? Because responsible innovation is something that would become a bigger issue. Because if you look at innovation, I always go back to the single combustion engine, one of the innovations that we've had. And when we innovated single combustion engine, we couldn't imagine the impact in suburbia, in lands, in water, the impact in deforestation, the impact in the climate change. We're a big contributor of the CO2 is for mass motoring. So how do we innovate responsibly? And do we really understand the impact? And artificial intelligence is a huge innovation that has come, and it's impacting our lives as humans. And I believe it's really important to understand it is happening, and how we're going to deal with it. How would it change our societies? How would it change our economy? How would it change the world?
Well, you're watching Global Connections Television, which is a privately financed, independently produced program. The opinions expressed on Global Connections Television are solely those of the moderator and his guest. Our viewers are invited to check out the website at www.globalconnectionstelevision.com to view previous shows. If you're interested in distributing our shows through PBS, Community Access Television, educational institutions, a website, or any other media outlets, please go to our website for more information. Global Connections Television is provided as a public cost at no service. Today we're looking at this whole role of cybersecurity, information, communication, and technology, and a wide range of other issues that impact virtually almost everybody on planet Earth. My guest today is an expert on this area. My guest today is Ms. Atefeh Riazi, who is the United Nations Chief Information Technology Officer. We're talking, Ms. Riazi, about this whole situation with ICT, cybersecurity. You mentioned social media and that type of thing. The UN just had a conference not long ago, as I recall, about dealing with social media, and you were involved in this, and we're talking about the role of social media, especially in a negative way. You were focusing on the group Daesh, ISIS, ISIL, whatever we want to call them. How did that conference get started, or what was the purpose of it, and what came out of it as far as looking at how social media play a critical role today in a negative way, perhaps?
So it was a tremendous conference, because we had lots of partners and lots of colleagues that attended that conference. I believe it raised awareness around the impact of technology, the impact of social media. The impact of social media has been tremendously positive. But as I said earlier, with technology, you have the positive impact, and you have what I call the revenge of technology. because technology is not neither good or bad. It's the humans that can use it for good and bad. I think there was a lot of good positive discussions around policies, that we have to have some policies around basic human rights and human voice in the social media. As we've moved from the physical world to the virtual world, what's happened is we know how to operate in a physical world, but I don't think we understand how to operate in a virtual world. In a virtual world, civil society, rule of law, means something completely different. And if you look at the social media and how Daesh uses social media for negative messaging and how they're reaching so many people, the question for us was, how do we use social media for positive messaging? How do we do that in an effective way to all the youth that want to do good versus that tiny, tiny, tiny percentage that is putting in negative messaging? We discuss a lot of areas of, again, human rights, human voice, and what is the right of someone that puts something on a Facebook, and then a teenage girl or a teenage boy or an adult, what is their rights when that right is not respected? How do you become effective in that space? We talked about cybercrime. Cybercrime is a big issue, and if you look at areas of child trafficking, where I mentioned earlier, where 80% of child trafficking has moved into the cyber world, and out of that, half of it, 80% is women, half of that are children. But no one is watching the deep web. No one is watching the dark web. And how do we move our thinking from the physical world to the cyber world? And how do we give it the attention that it needs so we can protect the people? And so lots of great discussion. It was a wonderful forum. I think that we'll follow up on some of the discussions. We had a lot of private sector representation, and there were some commitments made around supporting us in terms of technology and social media and analytics, so we can understand better and we can respond better.
And this whole, excuse me, the whole cyber world is changing so quickly, as you mentioned. It seems that it's almost moving at a geometrical pace. Maybe it's arithmetic movement, but geometrically moving forward. But are we making headway as far as getting a handle on this cyber terrorism, cyber attacks, different things? It's not only individuals. You mentioned the deep web and how you could use it for human trafficking, but we also have a situation where you've got governments perhaps that can spy on other governments. You have governments that knock out the electrical systems of certain cities or whatever the case might be. It could very well be that at some point airlines could be affected by this. Planes that are flying in the air, maybe they are today, I don't know, they could be attacked by a cyber attack. But I know there are many, many people who are very concerned about it. Governments are concerned about the private sector. But are we making headway as far as trying to get a handle on this and to get it under control? Not that we'll ever totally get it under control, but at least try to reduce the damage.
There's a huge amount of investment and focus on cybersecurity, and some countries are making some headway. Some countries have serious issues tackling it. You mentioned impact on the electric grid, which is huge because we have so much exposure when it comes to our industrial systems. And it starts with the grid, electric grid. It goes into transportation system, it goes to financial system, military systems. Most countries have huge risk, huge weakness, and it's much easier to bring in the electric grid in a country and impact the country tremendously than do it in a physical world. A cyber virus is much more effective. And I don't think we really understand the implications. And we are not protecting our citizens because we're not protecting the industrial system. You mentioned aviation with GPS. Imagine you're on a flight and you have your GPS on and you think you're this part of the world, but you're actually in this part of the world. And you think your fuel gauge is full, but it's actually empty. So intrusions into these systems happen every day. They happen today. We just don't know about it. Okay. When we find out, it's too late. How do we protect human life? How do we protect and bring peace peace and security means something completely different when it comes to the cyber world. I believe discussions, conversations around these issues are really critical. Mitigation plans, prevention, and protection is a huge issue we have to discuss. We've started a group, we call them the Digital Blue Helmets. And these are the cybersecurity experts that we hope to help our substantive side of our business in delivering their mandate in the cyber world, because it also comes to expertise. Expertise in the cyber world is pretty shallow. And policies, again, our thinking is about physical borders and rule of law and civil society, and nobody cares in the deep web whether you have a law or you have a policy. So how do we work differently to respond and to react and build capacity and build expertise? And this is one way of us trying to build expertise to help the UN deliver on its mission.
And you're having a parallel mission with the UN Blue Helmeted Peacekeepers with the cyber blue helmets, which is very interesting. When you were saying that, it brought to mind a large part of the United Nations that really goes unheralded, that you hear very little about. We hear about basically the Security Council, sometimes the General Assembly, UN peacekeeping generally, and that's about 95% of the coverage, media coverage. That's only 20% of the whole United Nations family operations. And you think about all of the hidden parts of the UN, like the UN helping to move aircraft safely in international airspace, or ships safely on the high seas, or to help move mail around the world, or what you're doing in this area of cyber technology and that type of thing. These are the parts of the UN that the public really do not hear about, but we should hear more about it because it's so important and affects us so vitally every day of our lives. And it's commendable that you are working on this and that you're dealing with these problems, working with the private sector, the public sector, the missions at the UN, the governments, non-governmental organizations, just on across the board. So it's really an outstanding job and a great public service that you're providing. So you're to be commended on that. And of course, we would encourage the media to cover that other 80% of the UN that does not get very much coverage. But this is very, very important. There's another thought that I had as we were talking about this. So much of the world's connected. We have computers and that type of thing, which means we're going to have waste that's involved, electronic waste, e-waste, e-garbage, whatever we want to call it. When the computer dies, when something happens to the keyboard, we can't use it anymore. How serious of a problem is that? And what are you doing in that area, or what can we do? I've often seen ships, flat scows, with just mounds of old computers and what have you, usually going to some developing country to be unloaded, and not in a developed country normally. But what can be done, or how serious is the problem, and what can we do about it?
You know, I go back to what we talked about, responsible innovation. And this is a big, big issue for us in the technology sector. I think from a 2014 data, there was about 42 million metric tons of e-waste. Now, although a small percentage of that is computers, they contribute to 70% of the toxic materials, poisonous materials that is in the devices, which is mercury, lead, cadmium. And when you burn the electronics, you get dioxin, which is similar to Agent Orange. So a lot of our waste, which we replace every 2-3 years, right? We change our mobile devices, and I, as a CTO and my previous role as CIO, been replacing our servers and storage, and you see the changes in the TVs and all the electronics, but we don't think about where they go. And where they go is they end up going to the developing countries. They end up being dismantled by the bare hands of young children, pregnant women, young men, and they get the mercury and the lead into their body, into the water, into the land. And the e-waste is a big issue for women. This is a negative impact of technology on women, because especially when it comes to mercury. Because your body looks at it, thinks it's calcium, and when you get pregnant, it gives it to the baby, which means it passes to the next generation, and has huge health hazard for these people. In the States, if you going to dismantle electronic waste, you have to have a hazmat suit, and generally it's given to prisoners to do. And there's a lot of restrictions and policies. But when it comes to other countries, we have to be a lot more conscious. First of all, I ask the technology sector to get rid of, and a lot of them are doing it, get rid of these materials in the computers and phones and all the gadgets we use. That's action number one. Action number two is, as consumers, we have to make sure we know where these things go and think twice about replacing and buying it, and be conscious about the negative impact.
Exactly. Well, Ms. Atefeh Riazi, this topic is so important, and as I mentioned before, it affects virtually, not everybody, all 7.3 billion people on planet Earth, but certainly a large number, and it could affect us for generations to come. But I want to thank you so very much for a very interesting and a very informative program.
Thank you. It was my pleasure.
Thank you. I hope you've enjoyed today's program. Please join us again for the next episode of Global Connections Television. I'm Bill Miller. Thanks for watching.